Hello and welcome to Confrontation Points video Snark. This video series isn't an audiobook. If you thought that it was, please stick around and learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. Our books discuss what went wrong and how they can possibly be fixed. I'm continuing my read-through of Cruel Prince by Holly Black. Not the first video, go check out the others. Links are posted below. Chapter 24. When Jude wakes up, she goes to find Taryn to try and apologize. Whatever her plans might be, she doesn't want to leave things with her sister like that. However, Taryn isn't in her room, so Jude goes into Oriana's room to ask where she is. In there, Oriana says that her ancestors had wings, and that there are times when she wonders if she wasn't supposed to have them as well. Oriana goes on to say that Taryn is with her betrothed, which, what happened when Jude was asleep? Because last anybody knew, Maddox refused to allow Block to marry any of his daughters. She continues on and says that tomorrow all of the family will go to a dinner hosted by Balkan and that she expects for Jude and Taryn to try not to murder each other. Jude asks if Oak will be there and Oriana says that Maddox insisted upon it. Ugh. Sitting with Oriana's jewelry is another golden acorn like the one she found in Lily Rope's dress pocket. Jude thinks about the story that Oriana had told about being concerts with Lily Rope, and then she thinks about the message that she'd heard from inside the acorn from Lily Rope about knowing that she was dying and to please watch after somebody. But now Jude is starting to wonder about the birth of Oak, and I guess we're doing this now, aren't we? This is what happens when you're the consort of the king and abruptly marry somebody else really, really quickly. I now understand why Oriana is trying so hard to hide Oak away from all of this, as if being around the Kingslayer isn't bad enough, but now we're throwing this into the mix. Jude questions this, but goes one step further to ask if Oak isn't even Oriana's child at all, but Lily Rope's and Dan's, the one that he tried to murder in Lily Rope's belly. Oriana is obviously afraid and demands answers as to how Jude got to this conclusion. Jude asks what happened 7 years ago, so Oriana begins her story. She and Lily Rope were basically best friends. Oriana says in an aside that even though Locke had hurt both Taryn and Jude, she still kind of views him as a motherly lay, if only because of Oriana's love for Lily Rope. In another aside, Oriana explains that fairy blood is thin, or to put it into layman's terms, they aren't good at breeding, either because of inbreeding or Lord knows what the magic is doing them. The fairies might scoff at the humans, but Jude tells the readers that breeding with the humans is basically what's been keeping the fairies going for so long. Oriana then explains what being poisoned by these mushrooms says to somebody, that when she got Lily Rope's message and rushed over, the friend was already dead. She stops her story there, so Jude fills in the rest so that there's no confusion on the part of the readers. Oriana literally cut the baby out from the belly of her dead friend. Oriana goes on to say that she named him Oak because of Lily Rope's acorns. I wanted so badly to believe that being in Dan's service was an honor, that he was someone worth following. That's what comes of hungering for something. You forget to check if it's rotten before you gobble it down. Jude questions if Oriana knew that it was Dan who had murdered Lily Rope. She says no, not at first, but then she began to piece things together, and after a while it was a little obvious. Oriana goes on to say that she and Maddox have an understanding between them. Jude thinks that it must make for a lonely life having to pretend like you love your husband and that your son is actually your child. But when Jude points out that Maddox must be planning to put Oak onto the throne, Oriana seems horrified and baffled with the thought, which is going back to that willful ignorance I mentioned in the previous chapter. Like, how stupid do you have to be? Take him far from the dangers of this court. That's what Lily Rope's note had said. Maybe Oriana should have listened. Jude then thinks about something Maddox had said earlier about how a throne transition is usually quite weak. However, since Oak is how old? 10 or 12 years old? Something like that. He's too young to be properly ruling. He needs somebody there to guide him into this transitional period. Somebody like the man who's been his father this entire time, who already has his a hand in politics. It would have been less subtle with a neon sign there, Maddox. Although I would also like to point this out. He had to see the opportunity in front of him with only 3 royals left. Yeah, with how much fairies like to stick their eggplant into things, I refuse to believe that Oak is the only hidden royal. I'm sure that there's a distant cousin hiding out somewhere. Oriana is suddenly afraid for Oak, which, going back to the note Jude reminded us of not even a page earlier. Wow, if only Lily Rope had warned you to take her son away from all of this. However, what Oriana doesn't know is that Jude has another card in play. Cardan. She could force Cardan to crown Oak and then become a princess. Her own future could be secure. Except for something that Oriana said not even 1 second earlier. Child kings do not survive long, and Oak is a frail boy. He was too little when he was brought into this world. No king or queen from any court would bow their heads to him. He wasn't raised for this burden. Jude might have been tricked into believing that Dan could and would become the king in a few weeks, that she would be safe in his court even if she was forced into the shadows. But Jude is simply asking for trouble if she helps to put Oak on the throne, not only for Oak to be murdered by Buckingham, but also probably herself. Excuse me, I need to go beat my head against the wall for a little bit. Chapter 25. When Jude gets back to the Court of Shadows, she's dismayed to find that the other three spies are all playing cards with Cardan. They say that he told them where the good wine is kept along with the jewelry of the now-dead princesses. Jude asks them what Cardan offered them, and while they don't deny that Cardan bribed them, they also scoff and are quick to remind Jude that Cardan is in no position to be making deals. Jude entices him and takes him into what used to be Dan's office. There she contemplates killing him, but knows that it would complicate her plan to put Oak on the throne. She isn't sure if she cares either way and points a crossbow at him, tells him that if he didn't want to die right now, maybe he shouldn't have tormented her so much before. And I'm not saying that she's wrong. She should totally not torment or bully anybody, full stop. But at the same time, how the hell is anybody supposed to know when stuff is going to turn to pot and you're going to end up being held hostage by somebody that you hate? Eventually, they make a deal. If Cardan tells her what she wants to know, then she won't shoot him. First, she tries to ask him about the note with her name and his handwriting that she'd found. However, when she points out that what she said was not really a question, she gets angry. Then she redirects the conversation, obviously to Tarn and Locke. He explains that Locke happily told his friends about how he'd gone to Tarn's window, left notes for her to meet him, and that sort of thing. However, even Cardan is convinced that the entire thing was nothing but a joke on Locke's part, which, wow, buddy, don't be shy. Tell her how you really feel. He goes on to talk about the confusing love shape that was going on between him, Locke, Narcissa, and Tarn, and that first he was with Narcissa, then she left him for Locke, or Locke lured her away with something. Cardan isn't quite certain, but it's not like it really matters right now. Jude demands to know if Locke loved Narcissa, and he agrees that maybe he was a little in love with her. Changing direction, she demands to know why he wants her dead. However, when he brings up the instance in the water with those things, he insists that he doesn't want to kill anybody. This makes Jude stop and think about how Cardan had waited by the water until it was safe for the sisters to get out. Then she recalls how she'd been trapped in watching Cardan fight his brother, about how bad that Cardan was in fighting. At the time, she thought that he was bad simply because he wasn't a good fighter, but this knowledge makes her question everything she knows about him. She explains about how Valerian tried to kill her twice. Cardan is surprised that Valerian would have been stupid enough to break into Maddox's house. Not because of Jude, but because of Maddox, who is a well-known military general with a literal thirst for blood. Cardan goes on to say that Valerian liked pain, anybody's pain, including the pain of his friends. Jude kind of wonders why you'd be his friend when it sounds like his enemy netted you the exact same end results. Jude then demands to know why Cardan hates her so much. If you'd been paying attention at all, then his answer should probably not be a surprise. He hates her because her family actually loves her and doesn't abuse her in any way. However, as you might expect, Jude is hardly impressed. After all, she'd spent the past decade living with a man who'd murdered her parents and kidnapped her away to this horrific fantasy land, which is something that she isn't shy about sharing with Cardan now, especially not her fear of this world in general. When Jude presses him if there isn't any more reason why he seems to hate her, he suddenly clams up, which he takes to mean that since he can't lie, he'd rather not say anything at all, which is honestly such a cop-out when you're writing fairies. This is a species that is known for clever twists of the word and skirting the subject, so why now? This is such poor writing on the author's part. He insists that she should simply shoot him, which I guess that's the closest that we're gonna get. As Jude continues to examine him closely, looking for any hints as to what he might be feeling, she randomly decides that Cardan is in love with her, and then she kisses him. Because of course she does. First off, girl, don't trust him. Fairies are known for their good acting, and right now I'm pretty sure that Cardan would do anything in order to avoid being murdered by you. Second, girl, a boy pulling your pigtails and dipping your hair into the ink pot is not romantic in the slightest. I'm so sick and tired of this trope, the idea that the more he teases me, the more it means he likes me. Mainly because it's only teaching girls from a ridiculously young age that abuse is not only acceptable behavior, but it's also wanted. It's how you end up in insanely abusive situations like Anna Steele and Christian Grey. Chapter 26. They make out for a little bit. At first, it almost feels like Cardan doesn't actually want to be kissed, which is icky enough as it is with the rapey undertones. Then he gives in and starts to kiss her back. And quite frankly, I'm not sure what's worse. Like, this is a guy who once forced a fairy date rape drug down her throat and forced her to undress. And here they are playing tonsil hockey. They stop when Jude throws the knife onto the desk. And I'm honestly not sure if they're trying to pretend like they're unaffected or if they actually aren't all that impressed with the entire thing. We're in Jude's head, and I still can't get a good read on what she's actually feeling other than a tiny hint of regret. Cardan then proposes that she should ask whatever she wants for herself so long as he gets lands insanely far, far away from all of this. He says that he doesn't give a hoot what Belkin does after this. He thinks that Belkin might have a son, put a crown on his head, but then laughs over the idea of Belkin's kid murdering his father as a new family tradition. Wouldn't that be something? Of course, any child raised by Belkin would likely be completely unhinged anyway. We've already seen how badly he was abusing Cardan, who was his brother. I can't imagine somebody younger, his own child, who has literally nowhere else to go. His pointy boots gleam in the room, and I wonder if I should confiscate them since they're potential weapons, and I remember how bad he is with the sword. Is Cardan bad with the sword, or is he simply so skilled that he'd rather pull his punches than actually hurt somebody? Because from where I'm standing, it's the latter. Jude is simply saying what she wants to see. After this, Jude leaves the room and tells the others that she's worked out something with Maddox, but that she needs to take a walk to clear her head and figure out how to properly explain things to them. She asks the other former spies to write down exactly what it is that they want and leaves. Outside, Jude sits and thinks about her options right now. Option 1 is to allow Cardan to crown Belkin as king. However, there's little doubt in Jude's mind that Belkin would overturn the rules that stop the fairies from completely and utterly messing with the humans. There's a high chance that he could completely and utterly destroy both worlds. Option 2 is to have Cardan crown Oak as the king. However, as previously discussed, it's likely that Maddox would influence the thoughts and actions of his son to the point where it would basically be no better than Belkin, or at least a different flavor of evil and warmongering. Jude doesn't even address the possibility of putting Cardan on the throne. However, in my opinion, choosing between the three princes is an awful lot like asking somebody to choose which kind of poo to step in, cat, dog, or horse. They would all be awful. However, there is a third secret option that Jude thinks about, letting Oak be crowned and then spiriting him away from his father, hiding him in the human world so that he can grow up without the influence of a literal bloodthirsty fairy whispering in his ear. And while that might sound like the best option so far, Jude openly admits that it's not ideal. They'd have to be gone for a decade, and that's obviously such a long amount of time. Besides that, there's little doubt in her mind that others wouldn't try to squat on the throne to build up their supporters. So when the time came for Oak to take on a more public role, it would be difficult to remove those people, especially if Maddox felt angry over the entire thing. She then looks into the lake of mass, the water that reflects other people who have looked in. It was introduced in an earlier chapter, and Jude says that she's constantly looking for her mother. Finally, she sees her mother, and she's with Maddox. They're gushing over the human looking in. Jude wants to tell her mother to run, but knows that it won't do any good for them. That happened a long time ago, after all. When she goes back in, only Balm is there. She tells Jude that Ghost and Roach went to the back room with Cardan to get some sleep. She gives Jude some food, and Jude asks what Balm's plans are. Balm points to, well, her bombs, and says that they don't exactly travel well. She says that the others trust that she has a plan, but that it would help if Jude could actually tell them something about it. After Balm says that none of them like Belkin, Jude asks if Balm would like to steal the crown out from under him. Balm seems to be on board and asks what she can blow up. Sometime later, Jude goes to get Cardan and takes him from the room where Roach and Ghost are still sleeping. She tells him about Oak and her plan to crown her brother and then spirit him away from Maddox. Cardan isn't exactly convinced and reminds her that doing all of this is hardly a guarantee that Oak also won't turn out to be a horrible monster. Jude's only evidence against this is that she was once in Oak's shoes, but going in the opposite direction. And I get that maybe she does know a thing or two about what it means to be taken away from everything that you've ever known, but at the same time, kind of on Cardan's side here. Doing this is hardly a guarantee that Oak won't take after his father, regardless of having spent a decade apart. Jude asks for a vow from Cardan, which he's obviously reluctant to do. She knows that she has to sweeten the pot, so she asks what he wants from all of this. He says estates, every single bottle of wine from the royal cellar, and for Red to teach him how to steal. He also puts a time on this. He will remain in her service for a year and a day. The day seems unnecessary, but whatever. She protests over the timeline, but he's quick to point out that if this takes longer than that, then things are probably in too bad of a way. Jude reluctantly agrees that he's probably right about that. Cardan then kneels before her and makes a vow to be her hand, servant, and shield for a year and a day. After that's done, she tells him to go back to sleep. When they all wake up, they'll all talk. I think about all the strangeness of his being here, sleeping in homespun sheets, wearing the same clothes for days on end, eating bread and cheese, and not complaining about any of it. It almost seems like he prefers a nest of spies and assassins to the splendor of his own bed. Considering the physical and emotional abuse she witnessed, do you blame him? I'd rather sleep on a cot with a scratchy blanket than be whipped for being weak. Chapter 27. Jude goes Cardan to the camps where the visiting factions are staying. She plans to find enough people who are willing to support anybody other than Belkin, and she's willing to barter pretty much anything in order to ensure that it happens. However, at least she's being realistic about what it means to put Oak on the throne and then immediately spirit him away to the human world. that in order to ensure that Oak has something to come back to, she's going to have to stay there for the next 7 to 10 years and fight any would-be usurpers. 7 years of drinking poison, of never sleeping, of living on high alert. Literally, nobody is forcing you to drink poison. She acts like this is some sort of high and mighty cause that only she can deal with, yet the entire reason why she's even at the camps is because she knows she can't do it alone, like, pick a lane here, book. Jude then reveals to the readers that she didn't bring Cardan there to show him off or to have him help charm the other fairies into doing this. No, she's using him for info about specific fairies that would be powerful backers to the goal. Why she couldn't have kept him stashed away and asked him all of this before she left is beyond me, but whatever. First person she asks about is Queen Annette. However, I hate the use of royal titles in this because it makes it seem like everybody is on the same level. They use king and queen for everything, including Eldred's position of power. It makes no sense. These people would be dukes or lords who promise to serve their king. They aren't visiting monarchs from a different kingdom. They're all being ruled by one king. Words continue to have meaning even if you don't understand them, or as I like to call it, tell me you're American without telling me. Anyway, Cardan explains that Annette is a ruthless leader, but Jude is still surprised that she would have left around the time that the killing started. Cardan goes on to explain that Annette doesn't have any children or heirs, but also abhors the thought of the slaughter of an entire line. He goes on to say that Annette is probably disappointed that even after murdering his entire family, Balkan walked away without the crown anyway. Jude tries to get in to see Annette, but wrongfully tells her troll guards that she's a messenger from King Belkin. They openly laugh in her face and tell her that Belkin was never crowned, and he has no right to call himself king. Jude returns to where she'd left Cardan and reports her failure. He mocks her and then tells her who she should go to in order to stir up the most sympathy and support. Both of them are outside of the recognized course, which Cardan argues makes them more likely to throw their lot in with the underdog, that they have a lot more to gain. She first goes to Severin, a man whose father was outcast ages ago. Cardan told Jude that Severin also has a human lover that he's quite fond of. Jude goes to Severin's camp, where she again plays as of being a glamored human servant simply to get an audience with Severin, because, it worked out so well the first time. However, once in his tent, she tells Severin that she's the messenger of the next High King and not Belkin. She flashes around a signet ring she'd previously taken from Cardan as a sort of proof of this. As you might expect, his only thought goes to Cardan as the prince. After all, Oriana has such a tight lid on who Oak's actual parents are that nobody even thinks twice about the entire thing. Severin is like, I don't have anything to gain from backing Cardan, which I suppose is fair. He is a small collection of people, and they weren't recognized by Eldred. It's only after Jude points out that Cardan would be better than Belkin he agrees to help her, sort of, under the condition that he won't be the only one who helps to dethrone Belkin, which I suppose is fair enough. The largest camp belongs to Robin of the Court of Termites. Why is everything after a creature who willingly accepted to be called a termite? Is it supposed to be some grand metaphor for how these insects destroy the structure of a wood without people even noticing? The second person Cardan told her about to see is Robin, that his court wasn't recognized by Eldred, but that it's simply quite large, that they'd want to get him on their side simply for its sheer numbers. However, before she goes over, Jude at least stops to think about how she's going to approach this, which is great that she's at least learning from her mistakes. She decides not to pretend to be another messenger this time, and instead decides to take advantage of the large number of people in the camp, so she gathers a bunch of firewood to act like she was simply set out to get it, and simply walks into the camp. From there, she sneaks into the largest tent where she's surprised to find Robin sitting around the table eating Chinese takeaway. Jude is in there long enough to listen to Robin and his human girlfriend talk about their fortune cookie fortunes. She's then dragged out from the tent by a guard and presented to Robin. Jude tells Robin that she represents the true High King and not the usurper. Robin is impressed with this and grants her permission to stay and talk. Jude begins her argument about them rejecting Belkin as their king. However, he's not as easily swayed as the argument of anybody but Belkin. He almost seems to be pulling the devil's advocate when he suggests that maybe Belkin will learn and change, which is for sure one of those, yeah, right, I roll moments. However, the main thing is that Robin says that he thinks that Belkin is a coward who murdered his elderly father and innocent sisters. What's worse is that Belkin uses military power to murder Dan rather than to do it himself. When Jude says she's not going to put Cardan on the throne, Robin is obviously curious as to who she plans to put on there instead. He literally threatens to have his guard torture her for the info, but Jude calls his bluff and he laughs over her courage. Robin then agrees to back Jude, the kingmaker, but only in exchange for a favor from the future king at an unknown date. Jude is reluctant to accept such an open-ended request, but knows that she can hardly say no at this critical junction, which is, why Robin demanded it as a stipulation of their agreement. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book Snarks, always free and updated every morning. Newly added to Patreon is to become a member without paying. You'll get access to the same thing on Tumblr, but on Patreon. Supporters can have access to so many more books now starting at $1 a month. Also new is a 1-week free Patreon trial, so be sure to check that out. Special thanks to Dawn and Phoebe for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my snark so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too, but not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions about my editing services, including pricing options. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of spicy short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. I'll see you next week, guys.